Hello everyone, this is Whitey, and in this video we are going to be taking a look at general abilities for Death Knights without a talent specialization. Alright, let's get started. Okay, in our Blood spec we have Death Strike, 150% weapon damage plus X to the target, and heals for 20% of sustained damage from the previous 5 seconds. Heals for a minimum of 7% max health, and it cannot be parried. Heart Strike is 175% weapon damage plus X, and strikes 2 additional targets. Damage against additional targets is reduced by 25% per target. Rune Strike deals 140% weapon damage plus X, it cannot be blocked, dodged, or parried. Vampiric Blood grants 15% of max health and increases healing received by 25% for 10 seconds. Health is lost when the duration ends. A Rune Tap converts 1 Blood Rune into 10% of max health. And Dancing Rune Weapon summons a weapon that fights on its own for 12 seconds and mimics the Death Knight's attacks. It grants an additional 20% parry while active. Okay, now moving on to Frost spec. Our Frost Strike deals 110% weapon damage as frost damage. Your Healing Blast deals X frost damage to the target and half of X frost damage to all other enemies within 10 yards. It affects all targets with Frost Fever. Obliterate deals 240% weapon damage. It's increased 12.5% for each disease on the target. Pillar of Frost increases strength by 20% and makes the Death Knight impervious to external movement such as knockbacks. This lasts for 20 seconds. And for our Unholy spec, we have Scourge Strike, which deals 155% of weapon damage as physical damage plus X for each disease on the target. An additional 18% of physical damage is done as shadow damage. Festering Strike deals 230% weapon damage plus X. It increases the duration of Blood Plague, Frost Fever, and Chains of Ice by up to 6 seconds. Shadow Infusion, the Death Coil empowers your ghoul, increasing its damage dealt by 10% for 30 seconds, stacks up to 5 times. And Dark Transformation consumes 5 charges of Shadow Infusion on your ghoul to transform it into a monstrosity for 30 seconds. The ghoul's abilities are empowered and take on new functions while this is active. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and close and go to our spellbook and abilities. These are our general talents that will apply to any spec that you choose. All Death Knights will have these. Anti-Magic Shell surrounds the Death Knight and absorbs 75% of spell damage, up to 50% of the Death Knight's health, and prevents application of harmful spell effects. Its absorbed damage generates runic power, 5-second duration, instant cast, 45-second cooldown. Control Undead. You can control an undead creature while under control. Its attack speed is decreased by 30% and casting by 20%. With Army of the Dead, the Death Knight summons an army of ghouls who taunt and attack targets around the Death Knight. The Death Knight takes less damage equal to dodge plus parry chance while channeling. There's a neat glyph called Death Menagerie that allows your Army of the Dead to summon a large variety of undead creatures. It's pretty neat, and I have a video for that. Okay, Dark Simulacrum. It places a ward on the target for 8 seconds. When the target spends mana on a spell, the Death Knight becomes capable of unleashing a duplicate of the spell. Only copies of some harmful effects from NPCs. Boil Blood deals X shadow damage to all enemies within 10 yards. It deals additional damage to targets infected with Blood Plague or Frost Fever. And Death and Decay corrupts the ground targeted by the Death Knight, causing X shadow damage per second to any target that remains in the corruption. It produces high threat and lasts 10 seconds. For Blood Presence, your stamina is increased by 8%, your armor by 55% of its base amount, and damage taken is reduced by 10%. Threat is also increased. For Death Coil, your ranged attack that causes X shadow damage to an enemy or heals X on a friendly undead target costs 40 runic power, has a 30-yard range on enemies, and a 40-yard range on friendly targets. Blood Strike is 40% of weapon damage plus X, damage increased by 12.5% for each disease on the target. Deathgate opens a gate which the Death Knight can use to travel to Ebon Hold. Chains of Ice reduces your movement speed on the target by 60%. It lasts for 8 seconds. And Death Grip pulls the target towards the Death Knight and forces that target to attack the Death Knight for 3 seconds. I have that miswritten there. For Death Strike, it deals 100% weapon damage plus X and heals the Death Knight for 20% of the damage sustained in the previous 5 seconds. Heals for a minimum of 7% of max health and cannot be parried. Mind Freeze interrupts spellcasting and prevents any spell in that school from being cast for 4 seconds. Empower Rune Weapon activates all runes and generates 25 runic power. Has a 5-minute cooldown. Necrotic Strike deals 100% weapon damage and absorbs the next X healing received by the target. It slows target casting by 50%, 25% on player targets. Frost Presence increases your runic power generation by 20% and reduces the duration of loss of control effects by 20%. Outbreak applies Blood Plague and Frost Fever to a target within 30 yards. Horn of Winter generates 10 runic power and increases the attack power of all party and raid members within 45 yards by 10%. Path of Frost allows the Death Knight and party and raid members within 50 yards to walk on water for up to 10 minutes. Icebound Fortitude grants immunity to stun effects and reduces all damage taken by 20% for 12 seconds. Pestilence will spread your existing Blood Plague and Frost Fever from the target to all enemies within 10 yards. Icy Touch chills the target for X frost damage and affects the target with Frost Fever, which causes periodic frost damage over 30 seconds. Plague Strike deals 100% of weapon damage plus X and affects the target with Blood Plague. Raise Ally brings a dead target back to life with 60% health and mana and can be used during battle. Frost Fever deals X frost damage every 3 seconds for 30 seconds. Raise Dead raises a ghoul to fight by the Death Knight's side for 1 minute. On a Pale Horse reduces the duration of slowing effects by 30%, and mounted speed is increased by 20%. Rune Forging allows the Death Knight to enchant their weapon or weapons with runes. And Strangulate silences the target for 5 seconds. Non-player victims of spellcasting also interrupted for 3 seconds. Unholy Presence increases rune generation by 10% and movement speed by 15%. Blood Plague deals X shadow damage over 3 seconds for 30 seconds. And Soul Reaper, which is your level 87 ability, it does 100% weapon damage and afflicts the target with Soul Reaper. After 5 seconds, if the target is below 35% health, Soul Reaper will deal a large amount of shadow damage. If the enemy dies before the effect triggers, the Death Knight gains 50% haste for 10 seconds. Alright, and that's it for our general talents. We're going to take a brief look at what has changed for Death Knights. The first thing is that many talents have now become specialization spells. Presences have been changed. Frost Presence now doubles runic power generation. And some abilities now cost death runes instead of blood, frost, or unholy runes. Okay, so here's our basic spec information here. This is the latest information for Death Knights. I'll have a few other videos up looking at specs, glyphs, 15-point talents, and some of the cosmetic glyphs that have been added. I did make a few spelling errors earlier in this video, but I didn't realize it until I recorded the audio hours later, so hopefully you won't hold it against me. This is Whitey. If you found this video informative or educational, please like and subscribe. Thank you.